Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to be digging into one of the most structurally unique and frankly psychologically piercing chapters of the Qur'an, Surah Al-Qamar, or the moon. Now, this is the 54th chapter, and it was revealed during the Makan phase. And for anyone who knows the history, that was a time of just intense hostility for the early believers. The prophet's message was under constant violent assault.
And that historical pressure cooker is really the key to understanding the surah's urgency. The source material we're looking at doesn't frame this as just some ancient story.
Right.
It's presented as a watershed moment. It's designed to validate the oppressed and, at the same time, confront that deep, entrenched hostility head-on. It uses these huge cosmic signs and then these repeating historical cycles to deliver a timeless lesson on accountability.
Absolutely. And what's amazing is how the scholarship we're immersing ourselves in pulls out these profound universal life lessons. I mean, lessons that cut across centuries, whether you're dealing with tribal oppression in 7th century Arabia or, information overload today. Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack two central, interwoven concepts that really come out of the classical commentary. First, what the scholars call the psychology of rejection. How and why humans so stubbornly deny clear truth.
And second, what we're calling the physics of divine decree, or Qamar. This is the idea of the immutable laws that govern everything: consequence, victory, and ultimately stability.
We want to equip you, the listener, with a kind of framework for recognizing these divine patterns.
Because the moral and psychological failures of these ancient nations, they're not just defunct history, they are repeating cycles. This surah is really teaching us to see the archetypes of denial so we don't fall into the same traps ourselves.
And the journey it takes us on is just incredible. It starts with this massive cosmic event announcing the last day. Then it walks us through 5 distinct historical examples of destruction, 5 nations that refused the truth.
Right, these archetypes. And it all culminates in the ultimate theology of destiny, the governing principle for the whole cosmos. It's this complete arc, from crisis to certainty. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, we are thrown immediately into a moment of pure dramatic crisis. The opening verses just confront you with a cosmological event that completely challenges your perception of reality.
The tension is immediate. I mean, it is startling. The first 2 verses state, Itarabati asatu wanshaka al-Qamar. The hour has come near, and the moon has split in 2.
Wow.
The sheer audacity of it, to couple the end of the world with the physical impossibility, the breaking of a celestial body, it forces any skeptic, right from the first second, to confront the fragility of their own existence.
And for anyone listening to this, I mean, the immediate question is always, was this real? Was it a metaphor, an allegory, maybe a vision?
Right.
But the sources we're relying on, particularly the major classical commentaries, they insist on a very specific historical reality here.
They really leave no room for ambiguity. The consensus among the giants of classical scholarship, we're talking Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, it's all supported by mutawatir hadith.
Which means the chain of narration is so massive that it's considered impossible to have been fabricated.
Exactly. And their consensus is that the splitting of the moon, Shaq al-Qamar, was a literal physical miracle. It wasn't a dream. It was performed publicly at the demand of the leaders of Quraysh as a specific proof of prophethood.
And what makes the testimony of the companions so powerful here is the level of detail, which, as you mentioned, seems designed to counter any argument that this was just some kind of mass hallucination.
Precisely. To call it an illusion is one thing, but the historical accounts anchor the event firmly in their shared physical world. The key testimony comes from companions like Abdullah bin Masud and Anas bin Malik. They reported that the people clearly saw Mount Hira, a huge, unmistakable local landmark.
Right there in the middle.
Right there, visible between the 2 halves of the split moon. That detail is so critical. If you're hallucinating, you might see a split moon. But to see a defined physical terrestrial landmark anchoring the separation in space that confirms an objective frame of reference, it was a crisis of undeniable physical proof.
So that raises a really powerful question. If this undeniable proof was given, what's the theological weight of immediately linking it to the phrase, the hour is near?
It's profound. And scholars like Al-Razi really dive deep into this. The moon is, for all of humanity, the primary symbol of cosmic regularity. It governs tides, it measures time, it represents the reliable, predictable laws of nature that our civilization is built on.
Our farming, our trade, our sense of stability.
All of it. So by having that symbol visibly, instantly shattered, God is sending a message. The laws of nature are not eternal. They're not immutable. They are a temporary grant. The universe is a construct whose rules can be suspended in a heartbeat.
And for the believer, that's a call to vigilance.
It's a call to constant vigilance. Muraqabah, a kind of hyper-awareness that if the celestial clockwork can be disrupted in an instant, then our own individual timelines, the stability of our own lives, are even more precarious.
And this is the moment, right, where the psychology of rejection really kicks in. The disbelievers see this, their eyes confirm it, and they immediately retreat. They turn away and just declare passing magic.
This reaction is the core lesson. It shows you the absolute limits of empirical evidence. You can present irrefutable proof, but if a person's heart is already committed to a certain worldview, the evidence will just be rationalized away.
They were psychologically pot-committed. They couldn't change their self-identity or social standing.
So they had to change their interpretation of reality itself. They saw a miracle and they called it a trick.
The phrase they use, Sir Mustamir, is so loaded. It suggests not just denial, but a kind of desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative.
Absolutely. The scholarship on the word mustamir is so rich. The first interpretation suggests the magic is transient or passing.
Like, just ignore it, it'll go away.
Exactly. It's a statement of procrastination. It will fade soon. Just wait it out, and things will go back to normal. They're trying to shrink the miracle by giving it a short shelf life.
And the second meaning is even more complex. It almost sounds like they're admitting some kind of power, but they just refuse to attribute it to the divine.
Precisely. The second way to understand mustamir is as continuous or powerful. It implies they were acknowledging that the prophet's magic was so potent it could literally reach into the heavens and break celestial body.
Wow.
But they still call it a human trick, not a divine sign. In both cases, the goal is identical. Avoid admitting a reality that would demand a total, humiliating surrender of their own authority.
I mean, that's just a textbook case of cognitive dissonance, isn't it? Their entire tribal and social power was built on the idea that the prophet was a liar. To accept the split moon meant destroying their own self-image.
And the commentaries are so clear on this. This is not an intellectual failure. It is a moral and psychological commitment to denial. Scholars emphasize that spiritual blindness is a real disease. The real danger isn't a lack of intelligence. It's an ego so invested in falsehood that it forces you to deny reality right in front of your face.
Simply because accepting the truth would be too painful? It's about pride and status, not skepticism.
Exactly.
So the surah then moves past the symptoms and gives the final diagnosis in verse 3. The root cause is itiba al-awa, the following of desires.
And that is such a crucial distinction. The main barrier to truth isn't identified as intellectual confusion. It's willful attachment to awa-based desires.
Which could be anything, right? Material comfort, political power.
Fear of losing face, simple hedonism. Their opposition wasn't rooted in some genuine philosophical skepticism. The truth simply threatened their power structures and their comfortable way of life.
So the intellectual objections are often just a mask.
An elaborate mask, crafted to protect a carnal or emotional attachment they just aren't willing to give up.
But right after this, the surah offers this incredible comfort to the few believers who are watching all this persecution. It says, وَكُلُّ أَمْرٍ مُسْتَقِرٍ, every matter is settled.
That concept of mustakir, or settlement, is the perfect psychological antidote to the chaos of that time. It's an assurance to the righteous that the current instability, this confusion where truth and falsehood seem to have equal power, is temporary.
It's a promise that things will eventually stabilize.
Moral reality will stabilize. The righteous cause will settle in victory and paradise. The arrogant denial will settle in inevitable defeat and hellfire. This one phrase provides immense sakina, or tranquility, to a believer who feels totally overwhelmed by the world around them.
And before the section ends, the prophet himself gets a tactical command that speaks volumes about spiritual boundaries. Fakawala anhum, so turn away from them.
This is the lesson of spiritual economy. After you've presented the definitive miracle, after all the arguments, after delivering the message that should serve as a deterrent, the command is to withdraw.
So there's a point of diminishing returns.
There is a God-ordained point where continued engagement with the stubbornly obstinate is not beneficial. In fact, it's detrimental to your own peace and purpose. The instruction is, deliver the message, present the proof, and then trust God with the outcome. The time for debate is over. The time for decree is approaching.
And that impending decree is brought to life with some truly terrifying imagery of the Day of Judgment, using this metaphor of spreading locusts.
Jarad Muntashir, The resurrected will emerge from their graves with their eyes humbled, kshan moving as if they were locusts spreading.
And that metaphor is so specific, it must be targeting particular fears.
It is. First, you have numerical density. Locusts can cover the horizon. Imagine the sheer overwhelming density of all humanity resurrected at once. Second, chaos and disorientation. Locusts swarm erratically. This depicts the panic, the loss of self-direction. And third, destructive stripping. Just as locusts strip the land bare, these souls are stripped of all defense, all dignity, all worldly status.
The imagery of Kushan Absiruhum, their eyes humbled, that's such a powerful, almost tragic contrast to their earlier pride, isn't it?
It is the ultimate reversal. In the world, they arrogantly turned away from the signs. They refused to even look at the split moon or the prophet's face. In the hereafter, they'll be utterly incapable of lifting their eyes from the sheer terror and shame that's engulfing them.
And they will rush Muti'ina toward the caller, the angel summoning them.
And finally admit, when it is far too late, this is a difficult day, the proudest will be the most disgraced.
Now we get to what is maybe the most unique feature of Surah Al-Qamar, this rhythmic heart of the chapter. The fourfold repetition of a single, crucial verse. It feels like a kind of moral and emotional punctuation.
It's a reset. After each terrifying historical account, it resets the listener. We shift from the horror of destruction to the profound mercy of accessibility.
This structural element is just. It's the theological core of the surah, isn't it?
It really is. It appears precisely after the stories of the first 4 destroyed nations, like a persistent echo, saying, "You have seen the terror, now heed the warning."
So let's look at the refrain itself. And we have certainly made the Qur'an easy for remembrance, so is there any who will remember?
Isarnahu Qur'an lidika. We have made the Qur'an easy for remembrance. Scholars note this is a unique divine promise about the accessibility of the text. This ease, this tasir, is multifaceted. It operates on 3 critical dimensions that allow anyone to approach it.
Okay, walk us through those 3 dimensions of ease that the scholarship identifies.
Well, the first is the ease of memorization. The phonetic structure and the rhythmic patterns of the Qur'an are a standing miracle. It's memorized in its entirety by millions, from top-tier scholars to young children across every language and culture on Earth.
It's just inherently friendly to human memory.
It is. And second, there's the ease of recitation. The rules of tajwid that govern how the sounds are produced. They ensure its phonetic structure is designed for the human vocal system, which enables this prolonged melodic recitation without causing fatigue. It's inherently beautiful to the ear.
And the third dimension, this one connects directly back to that psychology of rejection we were talking about, is the ease of admonition.
Correct. The ease of admonition, or dhikr. This means the core moral lessons, the warnings from past nations, the ethical commands, the promises of reward. These are transparent. The basic command to be just, to be truthful, to be God-fearing, that doesn't require a PhD to grasp. The foundational ethical framework is universally accessible.
But this discussion about ease leads to a really crucial nuance that the scholars, like Ibn Kathir and Al-Suyuti, are careful to make. It's the distinction between the ease of spiritual access and the rigor of legal interpretation.
This is such a vital guardrail against theological oversimplification. If the Qur'an is easy, does that mean every person is their own legal scholar? No.
Right.
The spiritual lessons, the dhikr, are easy for everyone to grasp. That democratizes the path to piety. But the extraction of detailed, complex legal rulings, istinbat al-ahkam, the advanced jurisprudence, fiqh, that still requires immense scholarly rigor. It requires deep linguistic expertise and a comprehensive knowledge of all the sources, including the hadith.
So the life lesson is a kind of democratization of the relationship with God, but not a democratization of specialized religious authority.
Precisely. Spiritual access is for everyone. No priesthood, no intermediary is required for a believer to understand the essential message of justice and truthfulness that saves the soul. But that doesn't eliminate the need for scholarly experts in complex matters of law. It's a balanced view that protects the community from extremism.
And the refrain isn't just a passive statement. It ends with a challenge. So is there any who will remember?
Kfahal min mudakir. It's a demanding rhetorical question. The word mudakir doesn't just mean hearing or reading. It implies someone who exerts active, conscious effort to remember, to reflect, to internalize the lesson. It demands action, not just passive reception.
So this phrasing essentially strips humanity of all excuses for failure on the day of judgment.
That's the ultimate point. God has done the work of facilitation. He's made the text memorizable, beautiful to recite, and transparent in its core moral commands. So the burden is now placed entirely on the human being.
No one can claim the message was too complex or hidden.
Exactly. A failure to remember is defined as an active, willful failure to exert the effort required to become a mudakir.
And the placement of that refrain, interrupting the stories of destruction, is so powerful. It's a constant reminder of choice.
It's the persistent voice of mercy in the middle of all this historical thunder. You've just witnessed a nation destroyed by a flood or a wind, and immediately the Creator's voice comes in and says, I made the map easy. Are you going to bother to look at it?
It's like a rhythmic, compassionate knocking on the door of your conscience.
Urging you to use the guidance that's readily available before you suffer the same fate as the people whose stories you're about to hear.
Okay, so now we dive into the narrative core of the surah, these 5 nations who represent the recurring archetypes of destruction.
Right. And these stories are the proof. They are the evidence that the psychology of rejection leads inevitably to the physics of divine decree.
And each nation fails for a very specific moral or psychological reason, and each is punished with a calamity that's uniquely symbolic of their flaw.
You see the pattern every time. The warning, the denial, the punishment, the aftermath, and then always that refrain reminding us the message was easy.
So let's start with case study 1, Noah. His people used the most basic and devastating psychological tool against him. They rejected the message by rejecting the messenger, just labeling him Majnun, a madman.
It's a form of social engineering, really, or what we might call canceling today. They immediately labeled him a madman to disqualify him from rational discussion. And the word wasdujir implies this rejection wasn't just verbal. He was physically repelled, shouted down, socially ostracized.
If the messenger is crazy, you don't have to listen to the message.
Exactly. It's the easiest way out.
So after centuries of this struggle, Noah's final prayer is just incredibly revealing. It's a moment of pure spiritual vulnerability. Ani magluban fantasier. I am overpowered, so help.
This is one of the most powerful lessons on ubudiyya, or complete servitude, in the entire Qur'an. Noah didn't ask God to make him stronger or to give him better arguments or a bigger platform.
He just admitted defeat.
He admitted total human defeat. He acknowledged his own capacity was exhausted. The profound teaching here is that divine victory often comes when the servant completely lets go of self-reliance and just hands the entire matter over to the master. The admission of powerlessness is the precursor to the ultimate display of divine power.
And the ship itself, the symbol of their salvation. It's described as Dhatil al-Wahin wa Dusur, possessor of planks and nails. Why would God highlight something so simple, the construction materials, for an ark that's supposed to survive a global catastrophe?
This gets back to the theology of means, or asbab. The punishment was cosmic, water bursting from the earth, torrential rain from the gates of heaven. Amidst this total collapse of natural order, their survival depended on the most humble, basic technology: wooden planks and metal nails.
God deliberately mentions the nails.
He deliberately mentions the nails, the dusser, to emphasize how insignificant the material means were compared to the global scale of the disaster.
So the real protection wasn't in the engineering of the ark.
Exactly. The ship survived because it sailed Tajri Baya Unina, under our eyes. The dual command for the believer is so critical here. We are commanded to build the ship, to use the means we have, to exert maximum effort. But our reliance, our trust, must be on the eyes, on the divine, all-seeing protection that's actually holding the thing together. It perfectly balances exertion with trust.
Okay, next we have case study 2. Ad. The hollow giants. They represent a different kind of pride, don't they? The arrogance of physical strength, wealth, sophisticated infrastructure.
They were the superpowers of their time. Their psychological barrier was a belief in their own invincibility, rooted in their material power. They had magnificent cities. They were physically massive people. They truly believed their strength and their fortifications made them immune to any kind of divine reckoning.
And their punishment was the Risarsar, a furious, screaming wind.
Sent upon them on a day of continuous misfortune. And commentators note that the sound of the wind, this terrible noise, was an intrinsic part of the psychological torture, not just the physical force.
And the aftermath is depicted with this really haunting symbolism of uprooted date palms.
Their corpses were left like ages nagelmunker, trunks of uprooted date palms. The imagery is so precise. The date palm is imposing. It reaches high into the sky. It represents stature and visible strength. But the warning is that something that looks imposing can be spiritually or even physically hollow at its core.
So they had external stature but no spiritual core.
They had tremendous external stature, military might, advanced civilization, but their spiritual core was rotten with moral decay. The divine wind just showed that physical might, whether it's military superiority or a massive GDP, is utterly useless when moral rot is entrenched at the foundation. They were just reduced to debris.
It's a confirmation that nations that seem too big to fail are often just hollow monuments waiting to be toppled.
Exactly.
Moving on to case study 3, the mood. This is a fascinating one. Their denial is rooted in a kind of democratic arrogance and social hierarchy. They rejected their prophet, Salah, because he didn't fit their social profile.
Their denial was fueled by ego and social snobbery. They couldn't accept spiritual authority that wasn't tied to aristocratic lineage or a huge following. They rejected Salih because he was Bashar and Minna, a human from us, and Wahidin, a single individual.
They thought it was crazy to follow just one guy who wasn't an elite.
Yes, they saw it as error and madness. They valued social consensus over prophetic truth.
And the specific test they were given, the fitna, was centered around an economic resource water and involved a she-camel. It seems almost mundane for a world-ending test.
And that's where the profundity is. The test was simple, but it demanded immense social discipline. The command was for a kismatum bainahum, a divided, regulated sharing of water, one day for the camel, one day for the tribe.
So the life lesson is about resource discipline.
It is. The real trial was restraining their ingrained greed, their sense of entitlement, and respecting the divine boundary on resource consumption. In a desert, water is life, and their refusal to share, born out of selfishness, became the gateway to their final transgression, killing the camel. It shows how everyday entitlement can become the precursor to a monumental moral failure.
Right. You'd think a world-ending sin would be grander than fighting over a water schedule. It just shows how entitlement becomes the gateway to destruction. And while one person actually did the deed,
The most wretched one.
the blame was placed on the entire community.
And that's a critical teaching on collective guilt. The verse says, Fanada Sahibam, they called their companion. Even though one man was the instrument, the entire society sanctioned the act. They encouraged it, or they stayed silent when they should have intervened.
So the society bore the guilt?
They endorsed the transgression, so they bore the punishment. And their punishment was a single sayha, a terrifying blast, which reduced them to Hashim al-Mutazir dry, crushed twigs like the useless debris a fence builder leaves behind. Their impressive civilization was instantly rendered worthless.
Our fourth case study, the people of Lot, introduces the concept of moral perversion that becomes institutionalized.
And it's coupled with this profound violation of hospitality and basic human sanctity. When they tried to assault the prophet's jests, their transgression was a total moral collapse.
And the retribution was swift and it was phased.
It was. Before the final cataclysm, Allah immediately blinded their eyes to Masna at a taste of the final judgment. It was a moment of shame and helpless disorientation, symbolizing the spiritual darkness they had already embraced.
Their ultimate destruction is described with this real finality. An adhabun mustakir, an abiding or settled punishment delivered suddenly in the morning.
That term mustakir implies permanence, an unchangeable decree. The message is that there is a point of no return in moral transgression. When perversion and injustice become institutionalized and normalized in a society, the divine decree isn't just a threat anymore, it becomes settled.
But the narrative provides this powerful pivot to salvation through Lot's family, linking their escape to gratitude.
Kudalika naziman shakara, thus we reward he who is grateful. Gratitude shukr is presented as the functional antithesis of the destructive, self-centered lifestyle of Lot's people. Their lives were defined by excess, ingratitude, and a constant search for more perverse satisfaction.
And gratitude is the moral force that grounds you.
It grounds a believer, preserves the soul from decay, and earns guaranteed divine favor and rescue.
And finally, case study 5, Pharaoh. He's the climax of earthly arrogance. The totalitarian leader who rejected Kuluha, all of the Naram signs given to him, he's the ultimate symbol of all the prior failures combined.
Pharaoh represents the absolute height of the human power illusion. His psychological barrier was pure totalitarianism and self-deification. He claimed to be the ultimate authority, political, economic, divine, all of it. So his denial had to be comprehensive. He couldn't accept any sign because his ego was literally fused with the state itself.
And his ultimate punishment is described using terms that just deliberately belittle all that earthly power.
He was seized by Aziz Muqadir, one exalted in might and perfect inability. The deliberate juxtaposition of Pharaoh's fleeting tyranny with Allah's timeless attribute of Muqaddir strips all earthly regimes, all dictatorships of their perceived invincibility. No matter how entrenched a state may be, it is utterly defenseless before the Aqd, the sudden, effortless seizure of the Almighty.
So, having laid out this timeless pattern of destruction, the surah then pivots sharply back to the immediate audience, the Quraysh of Makkah. It makes all these historical calamities immediately relevant to their own power structure.
And that shift is so crucial. It validates the patience of the early believers, and it confronts the disbelievers' confidence in their own power. The message is essentially, you, the Quraysh, are just another archetype in this cycle. Don't think your social standing makes you exempt from the fate of Noah, Ad, and Pharaoh.
At the time this was revealed, the Muslims were weak, few, and persecuted. The Quraysh were secure and boastful. And yet, these verses contain an extraordinary political prophecy.
The Quraysh were so arrogant in their unity, boasting, "We are a united assembly, victorious." They believed their numbers and tribal cohesion made them undefeatable. And the immediate divine response came. The assembly will be defeated, and they will turn their backs.
Which to the Makkans must have sounded completely delusional.
Like the ravings of an already defeated man.
But years later, this prophecy was fulfilled perfectly at the Battle of Badr. And the accounts from the companions, they anchor this not just as history, but as proof of the Qur'an's control over time.
Absolutely. The famous account in Sahih al-Bukhari details Umar ibn al-Khattab's realization. Years after the surah was revealed, in the thick of the fighting at Badr, Umar sees the enemy turning and running, and he sees the Prophet leaping in his armor, reciting this very verse.
Wow.
And Umar realized with this stunning clarity that he was witnessing the physical, inevitable fulfillment of a promise that, for years, had seemed utterly impossible.
So the deep life lesson here is it's profound, especially for us living through times of social or political anxiety.
It's the absolute assurance that the Qur'an controls history, not the other way around. It teaches the believer to maintain total trust in the divine promise, even when the current realities, political polls, social media, economic trends, military strength seem to overwhelmingly contradict that promise. The defeat of the most powerful tribe in Arabia was destiny, written and guaranteed years before the battle.
Your trust should be in the word of God, not in the fleeting powers of the world.
Exactly.
The warning then intensifies. It moves from the worldly defeat at Badr to the ultimate accountability in the hereafter. The criminals, the mujrimin, are described as being in suhur, a state of error and madness.
Their denial in the world is reflected in their frantic, delusional state at resurrection. And that madness leads directly to their punishment in Sakar, or hell, where they face the ultimate disgrace, being dragged on their faces into the fire.
The symbolism of being dragged on the face is so potent, it brings that theme of arrogance full circle.
It's the perfect inversion of their worldly status. The face is the physical center of human honor, identity, dignity. To be dragged on it is the final, complete disgrace. Those who held their heads high in arrogance, who refused to lower their eyes in humility to God's signs, will have their faces, the very symbols of their pride, ground into the fire.
And so we come to the end of our deep dive. The conclusion of the surah provides the ultimate philosophical and theological context for everything we've talked about. The unshakable reality of divine decree. So how does this doctrine, which can sound so deterministic, translate into a positive, actionable life lesson? How does it not just lead to fatalism?
The primary life lesson is sakina, tranquility. Understanding that all things, every joy, every defeat, every moment of pain are measured by Qur'an, by an all-wise, all-powerful creator. It removes the crippling anxiety of randomness.
It frees you from the tyranny of what if.
Exactly. The tyranny of what if I had done X differently. It anchors you in the spiritual reality of it was decreed by the all-wise. This deep acceptance is the spiritual antidote to the chaos and panic we saw in the stories of the destroyed nations. It lets the believer focus on their effort and their intention, knowing the outcome is secure in God's plan.
And the power behind this decree is described as being instantaneous. It shows the Creator's effortless control. And our command is but one, like the twinkling of an eye.
Kalam in Gilbesar. It emphasizes that divine power is effortless, instantaneous, and complete. No exertion, no delay. And this instantaneous power is immediately juxtaposed with a terrifying warning about the meticulousness of accountability.
The warning that every small and great thing is inscribed in the books of deeds, the Zubar.
And the sequence of the words here is the crucial lesson on taqwa, or hypervigilance. The text mentions sagir, small, before kabir, great.
That's interesting.
Humans are psychologically wired to overlook small sins. a brief moment of backbiting, a tiny moment of dishonesty, a seemingly trivial, hurtful word online. By placing Sigir first, the Surah teaches us that nothing is trivial in the divine database. If every small thing is recorded alongside the great, the believer has to guard their conduct in those seemingly minor, overlooked moments.
It demands a level of moral integrity that sees the seemingly insignificant as equally important.
Yes, equally measurable.
So after all the chaos, the destruction, the terror of Saqqar, the warnings, the surah concludes with this vision of ultimate serenity and guaranteed safety for the righteous.
The righteous are described as being in Maqad Sidqa seat of truthfulness or honor. This final tranquil image is the perfect resolution to the initial crisis of the split moon and the frantic state of the spreading locusts.
So let's just spend a moment on that phrase, Maqad Sidq, the seat of truth. What does the scholarship say about why this seat is described as truthful?
Scholars highlight two critical aspects. First, truth versus illusion. All worldly seats of power Pharaoh's throne, the transient status you get from wealth or social media, they're based on deception and they are temporary. This final seat in paradise is true. It will never perish. Its occupant will never be deposed. The pleasure and honor it grants are genuine and enduring.
It resolves the anxiety of having invested your life into something that just disappears.
Precisely. And the second aspect is the company. The location is described as in Danir or with Malik and Muqaddir, a king, all-powerful. The ultimate reward isn't just the material pleasure of paradise, but the guaranteed established safety in the presence of the omnipotent king who holds all power.
So after the believer witnesses the fragile nature of the physical world, the split moon, and the inevitable collapse of human power, they finally find rest.
They find rest and permanent safety in proximity to the ultimate source of all power and truth, a place where nothing can ever challenge their status or their permanence. It's the complete resolution to the crisis of denial and instability that opened the entire surah.
So we've journeyed through Surah Al-Qamar. We moved from the moment the physical world itself seemed to break the splitting moon to the ultimate permanence of the spiritual world in the Maqad Sit, the seat of truth.
And the integrated message is, I think, undeniably clear. History is tragically cyclic because the psychological patterns of denial, whether it's pride and strength like Ad or resource entitlement like Tamid, they repeat in every single generation.
Yet the constant refrain, "We have made the Qur'an easy," just strips away all excuses.
It does. It says the path to stability and salvation is direct, it's easy to grasp, and it's readily available to all.
The surah really presents us, the listeners, with a stark moral choice, a binary split that echoes the division of the moon itself. Are you going to be like the spreading locusts, rushing in chaos and panic toward a terrifying fate? Or are you going to be firmly established in that Maqad Sikh, the seat of truth, near the omnipotent king? So what does this all mean?
It means the defining choice of our lives isn't some future event. It's being made right now, in the quality of our response to the message that has been made so easy for us. The surah assures us that the decree is settled and accountability is meticulously recorded. The greatest failure isn't the inability to see some grand external miracle. It's the refusal to accept the simplicity of the internal moral mandate.
And that brings us to our final thought.
If this surah proves that physical might, like the fortresses of Ad, and resource control, like the greed of Talmud, are utterly useless as a defense against moral decay and divine decree, we have to ask ourselves, what element of modern society, be it our technological advancement, the complexity of our financial systems, or the dominance of our military power, are we currently relying on that offers the exact same false sense of invincibility? That is the pattern Al-Qamar forces us to break.